What's going on, guys? Kevin here, and today I want to share with you guys my top 25 hikes and places to visit in the Canadian Rockies. I have traveled to the Canadian Rockies on 3 separate road trips over the last 5 years, and in my opinion this is one of the coolest places in the world and one of my favorite places to go hiking in the mountains. There's an unbelievable amount of mountains, alpine lakes, hiking, scenery, and it is a place that has a ton of backcountry hiking and camping, but also a ton of places that are extremely accessible so everyone can visit, and it is a great place to plan a trip to. Now, I also have top 10 videos of hikes and things to do in Yoho National Park, Banff National Park, and Jasper National Park, but in this video I'm just going to culminate my top 25 hikes in the entire area of the Canadian Rockies. I will be kind of referring to the overall area from Banff to Jasper and everything in between and in that general vicinity. I have not been to Vancouver or too deep into Western British Columbia, so that will be a future video when I can make it there. But real quick, before we start the video, if you wouldn't mind, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out so much. I also have a ton of vlogs, travel guides, and top 10s from the last 7 years road tripping the United States and much more, so check it out. But right now, let's hop right into my top 25 hikes and places to visit in the Canadian Rockies. Alright, first up is going to be Edith Cavell Glacier, and this is my favorite place in Jasper National Park. If you're looking for this hike on AllTrails, it's going to show up as Path of the Glacier Trail on AllTrails, but so you know, it is a 1.1 mile hike with 275 feet of elevation gain. There's tons of other trails here, but this is the easiest one, and in my opinion, it's the best because it takes you right to the glacier-fed water where you can see the big chunks of ice right under this huge mountain. Mount Edith Cavell itself is literally a tower in the sky. It feels like it's miles above the water. It's such a powerful mountain, and it stands tall at 11,034 feet above sea level. If you only had one place to go in Jasper, this would be my recommendation. It is just that beautiful. Next up at number 2 is going to be Lake O'Hara and Prospect Lookout. So Lake O'Hara is roughly 14 miles without a shuttle permit, and all of that is hiking on a fire road essentially with around 1,500 to 2,000 feet of elevation gain. This is probably the most beautiful place I've ever been to in Canada. It is definitely the crown jewel of Yoho National Park. It's also just one of the most pristine areas and alpine lakes I've ever been to. The park system does a very, very good job at preserving this place and not allowing too much traffic here, which is really awesome, and hopefully people can continue to enjoy this lake for centuries to come. Now, if you're going to go past Lake O'Hara to Prospect Lookout, it's going to be on the Opabin Trail, and this is going to be that classic view of Lake O'Hara that you've probably seen on Instagram before. So if you're going to do this, the Opabin Trail from Lake O'Hara is an additional 700 feet of elevation gain and an extra 3 miles, but this is strictly just to the lookout point and not the other trails because there's a ton of other trails in the area. But this spot and just kind of walking the lakeshore itself are definitely must-dos. The shuttle permit I've never been able to get, but while they are super strict on needing a permit to take the shuttle up to Lake O'Hara, once you're up there, there is a good chance that you can take the shuttle down. It's pretty much if there's additional seats. So we actually got lucky and we were able to take the shuttle down, which saved us 7 miles, but you did have to pay for the shuttle, so make sure you have cash on you. Next up is Spirit Island, and this is probably the most famous and well-known spot in Jasper National Park. There are 2 ways to get to Spirit Island. There's the classic boat cruise ferry or a gnarly kayaking trip. The ferry is open from May or early June and runs all the way until the first week of October. You wouldn't think a lake that is this big would freeze, but it does, so you actually can't access Spirit Island in the winter. The lake that Spirit Island is on is 7.6 square miles. It is massive. So if you want to kayak to Spirit Island, it is going to be a big 17-mile round trip kayak. While this is incredibly scenic, this will take 8 to 12 hours of kayaking, and that isn't factoring in the wind, which You know, in the mountains, the wind can be very crazy, and kayaking against the wind is never a fun thing to do, and it's definitely not easy. Some people will do this as a multi-day kayak trip, but permits for the campsites go pretty quick, so this is something that you have to plan well in advance. And for the regular boat tour, it is 90 minutes, and the premium tour is 2 hours, which will cost somewhere between $60 and $100 per person. The premium tour pretty much just allows you extra time at Spirit Island itself. Next up is going to be taking a scenic flight from Canmore. This is one of the most beautiful ways to see the Canadian Rockies. A few years ago, I surprised Bree with a scenic flight for her birthday, and it was unbelievable. I could not recommend this enough. I can't remember the company we booked with, but I know our flight took off in Canmore, and I believe it was around 25 to 30 minutes long, and we saw some of the most beautiful landscapes that the Canadian Rockies had to offer. And this includes areas like Assiniboine, where you can't actually get to unless you hike or take a scenic flight, because there are no roads and parks like that. So it was really cool to see different areas of the Canadian Rockies that I haven't seen or hiked before. Next up is going to be Floe Lake, and I've got to say, this is probably one of the coolest hikes I've ever done in the Canadian Rockies. I know I've been saying everything has been awesome so far, but again, this is one of my favorite areas in the entire world, so there's so much to do. Every single trip I've been, we just find more. We didn't make it to Floe Lake until our third trip to the Canadian Rockies, but this is definitely going to be a big day. It is a 12-mile out and back hike with 3,146 feet of elevation gain, but most of that elevation gain is going to be coming in the last mile of the hike, making the end of the hike a brutal slog, and the way back is definitely going to take a toll on your knees and your quads. Floe Lake is in Kootenay National Park, and the lake is just pristine. I think Floe Peak above the lake is just one of the craziest jagged peaks I've ever seen. Most photos you'll see from here are taken with Floe Peak in the background. It is the super pointy one kind of facing left, but the views in every direction are amazing, including looking at Foster Peak to the west. Also, I want to give a huge shout out to my buddy Dusty for helping out with the footage from this one. I had a really tough mental day on this hike, so I didn't really have my camera out that much, but our buddy Dusty joined us for the hike. He's an awesome creator as well, so I will link his Instagram and YouTube channel in the description, so check him out. He's an awesome creator and an even more awesome guy. Next up at number 6 is going to be Lake Louise, and it would not be a trip to Banff or Canada in general if you didn't stop at Lake Louise. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world, and from the lakeshore you just get so much beauty of it. Canada has made this lake extremely accessible. The parking lot is only a few hundred feet from the lake, and parking at Lake Louise is $11.70 USD, which is a small price to pay for this beautiful place. There's tons of hiking trails that start at Lake Louise, some of which I will talk about in this video, but I think the coolest thing about Lake Louise is its accessibility. It may come with more crowds than the backcountry, but it's amazing that everyone can enjoy and access this place. The lakeshore is paved, so walking around the lake to get to different vantage points of the mountains is a great afternoon activity that requires minimal effort. At number 7, we have Moraine Lake, and similar to Lake Louise and Peyto Lake, which I'll go over next, it wouldn't be a trip to Banff or the Canadian Rockies without stopping at Moraine Lake. It's one of the most picture-perfect places out there. It's an extremely famous screensaver, and there's tons of photos of Moraine Lake all around the world when someone is talking about alpine lakes. The best way to enjoy the lake is to walk around the lake shore, explore the cafe and gift shop, and hike up the rock pile, which will kind of give you that infamous viewpoint and photo. The rock pile is only a half-mile round-trip hike with 50 feet of elevation gain, but it gets you just above the lake shore so you can see the classic view, and it's safe to say that Moraine Lake should be on every single person's travel bucket list. So like number 6 and 7, number 8 is going to be Peyto Lake, which is just, again, one of those classic, famous Canadian Rocky alpine lakes. This is going to be a 1.5 mile round trip hike with 275 feet of elevation gain. There's a lower viewpoint and an upper panorama viewpoint, and honestly the entire trail once the lake comes into view is amazing. It is a must and a classic if you're traveling to Banff. If you look closely from the top too, you'll actually notice that the right side of the lake is shaped like a wolf's head, which is one of the cooler things I've seen in Mother Nature. Now, on my last trip to the Canadian Rockies, Peyto Lake was closed for construction, so the trail might look a little bit different than in this footage. I have not seen it since they have redone it, but again, they know how popular this place is, so I'm sure that any construction they did still allows you to see this classic view. Next up at number 9 is going to be EEOR, which stands for East End of Rundle. This is a super fun mountain to climb with the summit sitting at 8,301 feet above sea level. East End of Rundle is the furthest east peak of the Rundle summits and Mount Rundle, which kind of connects Banff to Canmore on just like a string of a long mountain ridgeline. Now this is only going to be 3 miles round trip, but in that you will gain 2,729 feet of elevation gain, and towards the top you're going to be coming across a ton of loose rock scree and some class 3 bouldering. It's fun and relatively easy for anyone who has kind of experience in this type of terrain, but it's definitely not for the faint of heart. And if you don't have experience traveling on loose terrain, route finding, or scrambling, I would try to go with someone who has that experience, or maybe check out another hike on this list. We packed our helmets just to be safe, and we also had our Garmin inReach, so in case anything was to go wrong, we were covered. This hike is just outside of the national park and just a few minutes outside of the city of Canmore, and I want to note that I found that there is a short-term closure during 2022, so depending on when you watch this video, please research that beforehand, but at the time of making this video, the trail is closed for a good portion of 2022. We did this in the fall of 2021 before we even knew there was going to be a closure. At number 10, we have Sunwapta Falls, and this is going to be back in Jasper National Park, and this is technically 2 miles with 469 feet of elevation gain, but the waterfall is right next to the parking lot. There is a huge waterfall and a big canyon to walk along where you can find the lower Sunwapta Falls. Again though, this is another one of those extremely picturesque and beautiful places that is accessible to everybody. Most of it is paved and you can just walk around and get different vantage points of the waterfall. This is definitely an awesome one to check out. At number 11, we have Larch Valley, and this is in Banff National Park, and this is easily the most beautiful fall foliage hike I've done in my entire life. As a landscape photographer, I have chased fall colors all over the world, but Larch Valley definitely takes the cake. It is unbelievable and honestly hard to believe that it is real. My first time hiking Larch Valley was on my 3rd trip to the Canadian Rockies, and honestly, before this trip, I didn't even know that Canada got fall colors. This may have been naive of me, but I just assumed it was too cold up north to get those kind of conditions. Clearly, I was mistaken. Larch Valley is surrounded by some of the most beautiful mountain peaks in the Canadian Rockies and Banff, and this hike is going to be around 4.2 miles round trip with around 1,500 feet of elevation gain, and is worth every step. And later in this video, I will talk about a trail that goes through this and kind of continues on past Larch Valley. Next up at number 12 is Emerald Lake, and without hiking, this is probably the most famous lake in Yoho National Park. The only lake it competes with is Lake O'Hara, but because of the amount of miles for Lake O'Hara and the shuttle system, not everyone gets to go there, but Emerald Lake is extremely accessible. And even though this is one of the most popular lakes in the Canadian Rockies, I have probably been half a dozen times, and every single time I have found peace and solitude, which I definitely can't say about lakes like Moraine and Lake Louise. It just seems like a lot of people pass through here relatively quickly, so you can kind of just walk around and you pretty much have the place to yourself, which is really awesome. The color of the lake is so beautiful, and during the day the sun just brightens up this intense watercolor, and around sunset, even when the sun's dropping, the watercolor is still amazing. This is a great place for photography activity and for an afternoon out on the lake if you like to rent in a canoe or go for a cold swim. Emerald Lake Lodge is probably one of the most photographed hotel or resorts in Canada. It just backdrops the peaks and the bridge across to it. It is beautiful. It's relatively expensive to stay here though, so we've never stayed here, but it's definitely worth checking out while you're here and just seeing it. It's a very cool place. At number 13, still in Yoho National Park and actually on the same road to get to Emerald Lake, is going to be Natural Bridge. And this is just off the Trans-Canada Highway, about 2 miles from Field, British Columbia. There is the main Natural Bridge and the lower falls, both of which are right next to the parking lot. This is another really accessible spot that anyone can go to, and you pretty much park 5 feet from the falls, and it's just backdropped by the classic view of the mountains in the background. Next up at number 14 is going to be the Big Beehive, and this is going to be back in Banff National Park, and this is 6.8 miles round trip with 2,545 feet of elevation gain. This is a loop hike that also includes Mirror Lake, Lake Agnes, and the Lake Agnes Tea House. The tea house is open from June 4th to October 1st, and the tea house sits at 7,005 feet above sea level, where you can enjoy a cup of loose leaf tea, homemade mountain treats, and enjoy the views in every direction. A quick note on this, do not forget to bring cash because they don't take card, at least at the time of this video. The Big Beehive is one of the coolest angles of Lake Louise I have ever seen, and the trailhead starts right at the Lake Louise parking lot. You walk around the lake before cutting up into the trees, and then you come out at around Mirror Lake, where the terrain starts to get a little bit more rugged. There's no climbing or bouldering on this route, so any person with moderate fitness can do it, but I would definitely recommend packing micro spikes because when we did it at the end of September, it was very snowy already, and spikes definitely helped us on some of the steeper terrain. Next up at number 15 is going to be the Plain of Six Glaciers, and this is a big day hike from Lake Louise. Plain of Six Glaciers is a 9.1 mile round trip out and back hike with 1,929 feet of elevation gain. It's a long day, but it is so worth it. It's one of my favorite places in Banff National Park. The Plain of Six Glaciers is far beyond Lake Louise, and the entire environment changes as you hike. Once you get to the backside of the lake, then you'll start kind of going up in elevation. You're going to be going through the meadows and the trees, and then as the terrain becomes more and more rugged, and the terrain is going to be completely rocky once you're towards the end of the hike, and you're going to be surrounded by peaks, glaciers, and rock in every direction. Looking back, you're going to have a great view of Lake Louise in the distance, and you're actually going to see the ski resort that sits in the background, so this is a very cool view of the lake, of the resort, and of the Fairmont Chateau. Just a bit before the final viewpoint, you will pass the Plain of Six Glaciers Tea House, which is also awesome. You can grab tea, homemade mountain snacks, soup, and more, but again, make sure you have some cash for this one as well. If you would like, you can actually link this hike with the Big Beehive. This is what Hayden, Bree, and I did, but it makes it an even bigger day with even more elevation gain. But if you're up for it, I highly recommend it. It is an incredible day out in the mountains. Next up at number 16 in Banff again is going to be Johnston Canyon, and this is a beautiful canyon hike that's 3.2 miles round trip with 859 feet of elevation gain. This mileage is going to take you all the way to Upper Falls, but if you would like to shorten the hike, Lower Falls is about half the distance and half the elevation gain if you're not feeling like making the whole thing. But if you're up for the hike, I highly recommend going to the end. It is beautiful. It's a stunning hike through some beautiful canyon rock formations with the beautiful aqua blue Johnston Creek flowing through the entire canyon. For those that don't know, the crazy aqua blue color found in this river and kind of all of the blue Canadian Rocky alpine lakes, this color comes from a mineral referred to as rock flour, and that is in the water and gives the water a deep blue, kind of green, milky look to it. I love it. I think it's super cool, and it's always nice to note that not everything is an Instagram filter. This is going to be a pretty well trafficked hike though, so I would recommend getting there early. It's fine when it's busy. I've done it a few times, but it is definitely much more pleasant when there's not as many people there. Next up at number 17 is going to be another canyon hike, and this one is going to be Moraine Canyon in Jasper National Park. And this is another beautiful canyon hike that's going to take you across a handful of crazy waterfalls. There are going to be 5 scenic bridges, and this is an awesome afternoon activity. This is actually going to be a point-to-point hike, so if you have 2 cars, you can park one at each end of the canyon. Otherwise, you will have to do the full out and back hike, which is going to be 2.7 miles and 465 feet of elevation gain round trip. But if you do have 2 cars and only go one way, it's only going to be around 1.3 miles, and you get to make the decision if you would rather climb that elevation gain or descend that elevation gain. Next up at number 18 is going to be Paget Lookout, and this is roughly 4.5 miles round trip with roughly 1,600 feet of elevation gain. If you want to continue, you can go all the way past to Paget Peak Summit, and that hike totals at 5.9 miles round trip with 3,156 feet of elevation gain. The lookout itself is awesome. It has great views of Peyto Lake, and the building up there for the lookout is awesome and definitely helpful if you get stuck in some bad weather. You can wait it out in there. This was a really cool hike that I had not heard of before we did it. Hayden and I were pretty much driving down the road, and we saw these beautiful inversion clouds, so we pulled over at the next parking lot we saw, and we happened to read the map at the trailhead, and there's something called Paget Lookout, so we decided, why not, let's go up there, try to get an aerial view of the inversion clouds in the valley. It was amazing, so I definitely recommend this. But for this one, and kind of all of these trails in general, I would download All Trails, the offline map, so when you don't have service, you still have some navigation and GPS tools at your side. For this one and trails that are lesser trafficked, you'll definitely need it, but again, I use this every single time I go hiking in the mountains. Number 19 is going to be Athabasca Falls, and this is another awesome and famous waterfall in Jasper that's just a 0.6 mile hike with 82 feet of elevation gain, but there are walkways all over so you can move around, see the waterfall from different areas and vantages, and the entire area is paved again, so this is also another really accessible place for everyone. Athabasca Falls is backdropped by Mount Kirkland, and the waterfall runs right through the Athabasca River just off of the Icefields Parkway. Definitely a must visit while you're in Jasper, and it's practically on the side of the road, so you definitely should do it when you're driving the Icefields Parkway. Next up at number 20 is going to be Sentinel Pass and Minnestima Lakes. Sentinel Pass is a trail that starts at Moraine Lake, and it actually is the same trail that gets you to Larch Valley that I mentioned earlier. Once you hike through Larch Valley, the trail continues to go up and you will reach a few lakes called Minnestima Lakes. They are beautiful, and if it's not windy, you will get to see some incredible reflections of the 10 mountain peaks, kind of all of the classic peaks that you'll be seeing from Moraine Lake, but this will be from a totally different vantage point. And after Minnestima Lakes, just a little bit further, you're going to reach Sentinel Pass, which is a beautiful mountain pass that sits at 8,500 feet above sea level, gives you great aerial views of Minnestima Lakes and the surrounding mountains. If you would like to continue hiking, you can scramble up Mount Temple, but this would involve some class 3 and 4 rock scrambling. So I'd only recommend that for someone who has experienced summiting a peak of that nature. But Sentinel Pass is an awesome day hike from Moraine Lake. And as you are approaching Sentinel Pass, it might look a little scary with the switchbacks pretty much going right up this mountain face of rock. But I promise it looks way worse from a distance. Once you're on it, it is just a kind of rocky trail and super easy that anyone with moderate fitness could do. And the full hiking specs for Sentinel Pass via Larch Valley is 6.9 miles round trip and 2,621 feet of elevation gain, so you can combine this with Larch Valley, obviously. Next up at 21 is going to be Takkakaw Falls, and this is back in Yoho National Park. The waterfall itself is 373 meters or 1,224 feet tall. It's the second tallest waterfall in Canada. If you have it in view, you can see it from miles away. This thing is massive. It is such a cool place to stop. And once you're at the parking lot, you're just gonna have around a quarter mile to get right under the waterfalls itself. And there's a very cool bridge that you get to walk over too. I would definitely check the weather though, because there have been a handful of times that I've gone here where the weather has been really nice in Yoho, but up at the waterfall, it is raining, stormy, cloudy, and almost to the point if it's cloudy enough where you can't see the waterfall. So definitely check the weather before you go. It's much higher of an elevation than something like Field or Natural Bridge or Emerald Lake, so the weather is definitely more temperamental. At number 22, still in Yoho, is going to be Wapta Falls. This is 3 miles round trip with 410 feet of elevation gain. It's an amazing trail and pretty much flat until you actually get to the falls, where you can decide how low you want to hike down. I definitely recommend hiking to the bottom, but it does get pretty steep and slippery on the kind of loose rock and dirt. On the trail, there's some trees that have fallen that you do have to go above or below, but otherwise it is a great afternoon walk and hike. And it's definitely one of the most unique waterfalls I've ever been to. The watercolor is just amazing, and there's multiple pools at the bottom of the water that just have this beautiful turquoise color, and there's this big mound of dirt and rock kind of right before the waterfall. If you're brave enough, you can venture out to it, but when Bree did it, she got soaked, so I would do that with caution. And this is also an awesome spot to see a rainbow. Sometimes the weather kind of with the waterfall gives you a really beautiful rainbow that I've seen 2 times when I've done this hike. At number 23 is going to be Athabasca Glacier, and this is pretty much the entrance to Jasper National Park in the beginning of the Icefields Parkway. It's a 0.9 mile hike with 200 feet of elevation gain. You're going to be surrounded by glaciers here, but you can hike right up to Athabasca Glacier. There's a few things to do here. You can do the hike, you can take a bus tour onto the glacier, or you can even do some glacier travel with crampons and ice axes if you want to book that more adventurous tour. The bus, I'll be honest, kind of scares me. I haven't done it, but it just seems kind of crazy to have a massive 50-person bus on a glacier. So it looks cool, but definitely not for me. And while this glacier is one of the most beautiful stops in Jasper, it's also pretty heartbreaking, but they do have signs all the way up to the glacier where you can see the actual real-time receding of the glacier over the last few hundred years. They pretty much have different signs that mark where the glacier was at what year, and it is crazy to see how much this has receded. But it is very enlightening, and for this hike especially, I highly recommend reading all of the signs along the way to learn more about the glacier and the receding. At number 24, back in Jasper, is going to be Pyramid Lake and Pyramid Island. This is a short and scenic 0.4 mile trail with 32 feet of elevation gain. It's definitely an awesome stop. As far as Jasper National Park goes, we had the best fall foliage while we were here of any other place we went to in Jasper, and it was incredible. And they had so many yellow aspen trees and yellow arches, so it was really scenic. And then from there you can see a bunch of other mountains of the national park. It's a nice short and easy stop, so it's a great place for anyone to enjoy. And while you're there, I would also recommend stopping at Pyramid Lake Resort. This is just a beautifully scenic kind of lake shore where you can kind of hang out, enjoy. There's picnic tables, there's chairs. This is awesome, and it is just about a quarter mile, half mile drive maybe from the parking from Pyramid Island. Number 25 is simply going to be driving the Icefields Parkway. For most people, if you're going to Jasper, you're going to be driving to Jasper via the Icefields Parkway, which is the highway that connects Jasper National Park and Banff National Park. This is one of the most scenic drives I've ever done. The parkway is 142 miles of mountains, nonstop views the entire way. It is just incredible. For this one, there is gas in one place along the way, but it is super expensive and marked up, as you can imagine, because it is a pretty remote area. So So I would recommend filling up your gas tank in Banff or Jasper before you leave, depending on the direction you're going. And this is also great for someone who maybe has time to visit Banff National Park but doesn't have time to go to Jasper. This is a great day activity just to make the drive and stop at all of the roadside stops. So for this, I definitely recommend waking up early because you're going to want to stop a million times. And if you're lucky, you will probably see some wildlife too. We've seen a ton of wildlife doing this drive a few times. Anyways, that is going to wrap up this video in my top 25 places in the Canadian Rockies. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is such a cool video and I'm so happy to make this because it just culminates so many of my favorite places that I've been to and one of my favorite regions in the world. So again, if you're not already, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up. If you have any questions, advice, or recommendations, please leave them down below in the comments. Would love to hear what you guys have to say and if you like this video or not. But anyways, thanks again for watching. I will see you later.